Grace Turner stood on the sidewalk that rainy afternoon, feeling the mud soak through her jeans, coat, and hair. For a moment, she simply stared at the ground.
You all know me, it me grand. Thank you so much for stopping by, and welcome to Mr. Sam Stories. Please take a quick second to like and subscribe to this channel. It really helps us grow. Tell us where you're watching from. Your support means so much to us. Thank you once again.
Too shocked to react. The cold wetness clung to her skin like a second insult. People around her gasped. A teenager whispered, "Did that guy do it on purpose?" Grace didn't answer. Her heart hammered in her chest. She felt not just drenched, but disrespected, trampled, reduced again to the insignificant woman her ex-husband once tried to make her believe she was. She took a shaky breath, trying to stay composed. 8 months earlier, Grace had divorced Maxwell Hartman, a ruthless and vain real estate billionaire. Maxwell was the CEO of Hartman Properties and boasted about owning malls and luxury developments all over London. In public, people admired him. In private, he belittled Grace. "You earn pennies," he would sneer when she came home from teaching at school. "Do you know how embarrassing that is for me?" Grace would reply softly, "I love my work, Max." He would chuckle cruelly. "Yes, yes, let's all applaud the noble little schoolteacher." Over time, the hurt piled up like emotional bruises. After 5 years of living under Maxwell's flaunted wealth and constant disrespect, Grace's spirit began to collapse. She finally gathered her courage and filed for divorce. Maxwell didn't even bother pretending to care. "Good choice," he smirked. "I'll find someone who fits my class." He kept every property and asset. Grace left with nothing except 2 suitcases and her teaching credentials. Friends asked, "Aren't you angry?" Grace shook her head. "I don't want revenge. I just want peace." She moved into a small apartment, started living simply, and spent her time rebuilding her confidence. Months later, Grace attended a charity event supporting underfunded schools. While standing alone by a refreshment table, she met a man named Adrian Harrington. He had gentle eyes and a calm voice. "You're a teacher?" he asked with interest. She nodded. "I work with 6- and 7-year-olds. Adrian smiled. "That sounds rewarding." They talked for hours about childhood education, empathy, and community programs. When Grace jokingly asked him about his life, Adrian simply said, "I help with public projects." She didn't pry. There was no arrogance about him, no comparison of salaries or worth. After dating quietly for months, Adrian finally revealed the truth. "Grace, I've been keeping something from you," he said nervously one evening. Grace looked concerned. "Is it serious?" Adrian exhaled. "My father is Prime Minister Charles Harrington." Grace froze. "Prime Minister?" He nodded. "I hid it because people treat me differently when they know." Grace stared at him. "Adrian, I don't care who your father is. I care who you are." He smiled in relief. "Then I'm the luckiest man alive." That night, Adrian realized Grace loved him, without knowing his world-shaking background. They married quietly 3 months later in a private ceremony. Grace wore a modest ivory dress. The Harrington family welcomed her warmly. Adrian's father said kindly, "You are exactly the sort of woman I hoped Adrian would choose. Intelligent, kind, grounded." Grace remained humble despite her new status. When journalists called her the Prime Minister's daughter-in-law, she politely redirected attention to her work in education. She continued teaching every morning. Parents liked her genuine manner. Children adored her. If people recognized her, she simply smiled and continued with her lessons. That rainy Tuesday afternoon, Grace finished grocery shopping, dressed casually in jeans and a raincoat, hair in a ponytail. As she crossed the street, a black Rolls-Royce approached. She stepped carefully around a puddle, but the car deliberately accelerated. The puddle erupted, drenching her in filthy brown water. She gasped. The window rolled down, revealing Maxwell. His laughter was loud and ugly. "Grace, You still shop like peasants. Grace blinked through mud. Maxwell, why would you do that? He snickered. Because I can. And because you're still foolish enough to walk instead of being driven. Beside him sat a younger woman wearing oversized sunglasses and expensive jewelry. She snorted. You dated that? Maxwell chuckled. I had my charity phase. Grace's voice was thin but steady. Maxwell, you're behaving disgracefully. He waved dismissively. You no longer exist in my world, Grace. Good luck with your little classroom. With a final arrogant laugh, he sped off. Grace stood there trembling, not from the cold, but from the humiliation that punched old wounds open again. People stared, whispered, filmed. A stranger softly asked, Are you all right? Grace forced a smile. I will be. Grace called Adrian with shaking hands. Can you pick me up? 20 minutes later, a government vehicle arrived. Adrian stepped out, and when he saw Grace soaked in mud, his face hardened. Who did this? Grace hesitated. Maxwell. Adrian's jaw tightened. Your ex-husband. Did he do it deliberately? Grace nodded slowly. Adrian turned to his security team. Find everything about Maxwell Hartman. Now. His voice had a tone Grace had never heard before. Calm and dangerous. She realized that this was not just Adrian the gentle partner. This was the son of the Prime Minister. That evening, the video of Maxwell splashing Grace hit the internet. Spread like wildfire. People commented, cruel, heartless. What kind of man does this? Then someone wrote, Wait, that's Grace Harrington. Suddenly, headlines exploded. Billionaire splashes Prime Minister's daughter-in-law. Journalists camped outside Maxwell's estate. Users shredded him online. You bullied a woman who teaches children. Powerful men showing their true selves. Grace refused interviews. She said simply, I don't want this to be about revenge. I just want respect. But momentum had already begun. Maxwell's phone lit nonstop. His lawyer yelled, Maxwell, do you realize who she is now? Maxwell stammered. How was I supposed to know? She said she was a teacher. The lawyer snapped. She is a teacher. But she's also part of the Harrington family. Panic spread through Maxwell's team. PR managers scrambled. Board members raged. You've started a political nightmare, one shouted. Maxwell paced in anxiety. I'll issue a statement. Too late, the lawyer muttered. Too late and too little. The next morning, Maxwell received a call. The voice on the phone stated crisply, You will appear on national television tonight and issue a formal apology. Live. On camera. Maxwell swallowed. I'd prefer a written apology. The voice cut him off. This is non-negotiable. Maxwell begged his board. Do I really need to do this? His chairman said coldly. You publicly humiliated a member of the Prime Minister's family. You will publicly repent. That evening, Maxwell sat under hot studio lights. The camera rolled. The host introduced him. Tonight, Mr. Maxwell Hartman addresses the incident involving Grace Harrington. Maxwell cleared his throat. I want to apologize to Grace. I acted immaturely. The host pressed. Describe exactly what you did. Maxwell winced. I intentionally drove through a puddle to splash her with mud. Why? I thought it was amusing. Would you have done it if you knew who she was? Maxwell froze. The host leaned forward. Answer. Maxwell muttered. No, the host asked quietly. So respect is only for the powerful? Silence filled the studio. Maxwell's face reddened. His apology looked insincere and self-serving. Viewers erupted online. He's only sorry because he got caught. A bully exposed. Meanwhile, Grace watched the interview at home. Adrian sat beside her. Are you all right? He asked gently. Grace nodded. I don't enjoy seeing him humiliated. I just want him to stop hurting people. Adrian took her hand. Your integrity is your crown, Grace. The next morning Maxwell's CFO called, his voice shaking. "Maxwell, we have a crisis. The government just froze all our contracts." Maxwell nearly dropped the phone. "On what grounds?" "Ethics violations. Image liability. They're reviewing everything." Then banks called. Investors panicked. Stock prices dropped. Maxwell rushed into an emergency board meeting, drenched in sweat. "We need to reassure stakeholders." The chairman glared. "We need to remove the problem. And that problem is you." The vote was swift and merciless. Maxwell was removed as CEO. Stripped of authority. Board members avoided eye contact. Maxwell shouted, "This is unfair." The chairman replied, "What's unfair is that your cruelty has cost this company hundreds of millions." As Maxwell collected his belongings, an assistant whispered sympathetically, "Sir, maybe this is a lesson." Maxwell didn't answer. He simply walked out of the building realizing for the first time he had no power. Meanwhile, Grace continued her work quietly. She arrived at school the next day as usual. The children ran up to her, laughing, hugging. A little girl said, "Miss Grace, I saw you on TV. You looked like a superhero." Grace smiled. "I'm just a teacher, sweetheart." Parents thanked her for remaining graceful and calm throughout the scandal. She replied, "Kindness is always stronger than mockery." Weeks later, Grace gave a speech about empathy and respect at an education conference. She didn't mention Maxwell. She didn't mention the mud. Instead, she said, "Every person deserves dignity, whether they are wealthy or working class, powerful or ordinary. Our value is not defined by money or status, but by how we treat others." The audience rose in applause. The video of her speech went viral, not because of drama, but because of its truth. At home, Grace and Adrian welcomed their first child, a boy. They named him Samuel. Grace often rocked him to sleep whispering, "You will grow up knowing that real strength is kindness." Adrian would kiss her forehead and say, "I married a woman richer than any billionaire, in character and in heart." Grace lived surrounded by love, fulfillment, and quiet dignity. Maxwell Hartman ended up living in a rented flat, away from cameras and admirers. One evening, as he walked alone, he passed a puddle. Car splashed through it. Mud sprayed across him. For a moment Maxwell froze, shocked and dripping. Passers-by snickered. Maxwell looked up at the sky, not in anger but in realization. Perhaps life had finally taught him what dignity truly meant. Meanwhile, Grace never gloated, never sought vengeance. She believed that karma had its own timing. And in the end, it wasn't power that triumphed, but humility.